Hello and welcome to another episode of Crystal Confab. I'm, of course, joined by my fabulous confabbers, Nicholas and Adam, and we are going to dive into something that I would say is really important to cover: misleading names and misnamed crystals. Now, this is a can of worms and a Pandora's box, and I'm sure some people are going to be annoyed, but I think this is going to be a good one.
Yeah, I think it's something where we probably upset those that are strictly into the geology of stones. Obviously, that has been a long passion for a long time, but crystals and stones have also been something that have been associated with spirituality and religion and all that type of thing. And that's where sometimes when they meet in the middle, there can be some disagreements, can't there, Carl?
Absolutely. And I think Nicholas understands where the history of how language changes can make that an even more complex beast.
Yeah, and we're always as humans, we are as a species always trying to fit things into nice, neat little boxes, and nature doesn't work that way. And so it is helpful to have new terms that describe this weird little rock we found, which is maybe chemically identical to that less weird rock over there, but they don't look the same. There's nothing inherently wrong with that, but unfortunately, the market does some wild stuff to misrepresent claims and stretch the truth and make one thing masquerade as something else. And that's really where the trouble comes from.
And so we've chosen some different crystals and stones today that really get our goat. So basically, this is just three guys having a whinge today in this episode. So I'm going to start off with one that's actually a bit local to Australia, and it's known as Atlanticite. Now, Atlanticite is a combination of two different crystals growing together. It is serpentine, which is a green stone or crystal, and it has small dots normally of purple in it, which is the stitchite. Now, most commonly found in Australia and Tasmania, you will find a little bit of not so nice stuff in South Africa as well. To the best of my knowledge, those are the two places that they're found in the world. Now, what's really interesting about this is it was given what's called a trade name of Atlanticite. And we'll talk about a few others in this episode as well, where giving something a name where it's like, kind of got a connotation or a reference to a new agey thing. It could be heaven light, or there are millions of them. If it sounds a bit too new agey, it probably wasn't named after a geologist. It was probably named or renamed by someone who just wanted to sell a lot of it. Now, the reason this one really gets my goat is because it's found primarily in the southern hemisphere. Atlantis, as we know, is a an ancient civilization, which we're still toying up about where it is, whether it's somewhere near the Caribbean and the Bermuda Triangle, or whether it's somewhere in the waters of Europe or around that area as well. But I definitely don't believe that Atlantis was anywhere near Australia. You may have heard of another ancient land called Lemuria, which I'm really passionate about. It's believed to have extended, a big landmass that encompassed Australia, New Zealand, maybe even India, Madagascar, and so on. Very similar to what scientists would refer to as Gondwana. But if we come back to this crystal of Atlanticite, this has been given this name basically just to catch people's attention. Atlanticite has no kind of connection, in my understanding or my experience, to the energy of Atlantis. It's very, how I work with the stone. Serpentine is one of my favorite, if not my favorite, crystals for overcoming fear. Whereas stitchite is really good for helping us as a crown chakra crystal for allowing us to connect with our not only our ability to connect to our spirituality, but to share the wisdom that we get from our spiritual practices as well. This really does lean in, and I would probably, if I got to rename it, it would be better named Lemurianite because of that energy of connection to nature, transformation, sharing of knowledge, because Lemurians are very much about sharing of knowledge, whereas Atlanteans were very much more, it was more of a hierarchy kind of scheme, in my opinion. So this is just one crystal that I hate when I hear Atlanticite, because geographically, energy wise, and so on. It has no reference or linking to that. It's just someone obviously had an infatuation with Atlantis, thought that would be a great way to sell it, and off they've gone. So that's the crystal that gets my goat. If you were to talk to a geologist and say, "Oh, I've got some Atlantisite," they would either slap you, ignore you, or totally diss you. Serpentine stitchite or stitchite in serpentine would be a more correct geological name. And when it comes to referring to that stone, that's what I choose. What about yourself, Kyle? What gets your goat?
Honestly, other than everything being called a jasper or an onyx, I think I'll leave Nicholas to dive into that a little bit. And we have covered that in some episodes prior. For me, my big one, especially recently, is this sphalerite and this purple sphalerite trend that came out. And I'm sure you've all seen it. It's this stuff, right? It looks really veiny. It's purple. It's a bit glittery. There's clearly a combination of things going on. And it's actually been tested to have fluorite, quartz, muscovite, manganese, and like no sphalerite. Sphalerite is a zinc sulfide. It is highly lustrous. It is often metallic. It is heavy and it's also soft. And all of these things, these are not. And what I did was I bought this piece, then I bought this piece. I worked with them quite intently. And then I got this guy. And if you've heard me talk about skulls, there's that connection to information. Let me blend the words together. And I asked this skull directly, do you have any sphalerite in you? And it just said no. Like it said plainly no. Trust in the fact that it feels more connected to fluorite and quartz. It has a more cerebral connection. It has a more informative energy. When you then connect to real sphalerite, here's a couple of examples. Really beautiful gem quality material from Spain. And this is an example of where it's kind of forms with other stuff. This is from Broken Hill. This is spessartine garnet, galena with a bit of marcasite, and I think a bit of chalcopyrite and bustamite as well. Very complex. You will see these beautiful stepped metallic crystals on fluorite quite often in like Cave and Rock, Missouri, Illinois. Those examples have a bit of sphalerite that they form with. But this chap, no, it's just not the thing. It feels different. It works differently. For me, sphalerite has this link between earth and fire. It's alchemical, it's transformative, it's action-driven, it's kind of lateral, less obvious. It doesn't, for me, work on what's right in front of you. Whereas when I get fluorite and quartz together, it's like facts, it's information, it's order, it's organized, it's air, it's clarity, it's thinking. But whenever I hold sphalerite, it's like, let's do something, let's take some action, let's be excited, it doesn't have to make sense. Why don't you try something different? Why don't you do what's over there? And it's that sitting with the stone that I think is so important. Nicholas spoke about this in the violin episode, that process of connecting to something through understanding what it is and then actually sitting with it and connecting to it and understanding what it's trying to tell you. It's like actually listening to a conversation instead of speaking over someone, right? Let the crystal speak for itself. And whenever I've let sphalerite speak for itself, there is so much more vivacious energy. There is so much more sparkle. Not that this isn't sparkly and beautiful and wonderful, but this always for me works in a way that is like, let's create a bit of order. Let's make a little bit of sense of the information that's happening. Let's kind of process things. Let's be a little bit more deliberate. And that is like, they're so different. They're so different to each other. And when I've been able to sit with those fluorite pieces with the sphalerite, that combination of energy, again, feels different. They feel like they're working together in a different way than this material does. And I'm really annoyed that I didn't like steal a piece from work to show, because there's a couple of really good examples that I could have brought. But have a little look when you are drawn to something, when you are connecting to something, sit with it. Does it actually make sense? Does what is being said about it actually connect to how you're connecting to it? Does the words in the book make sense to the stone in your hands? Do a little bit of extra research. What's really important, I think, as well, is like sulfides as a mineral lot. Like it includes stuff like pyrite and marcasite, coverlite. There's all of these very transformative, action-driven energies that all fall into sulfides. There's something about those chaps that like to do stuff, right? Whereas I think fluorite, especially, it's much more receptive. It's less shouty. It's not about like what I feel I have gotten from sphalerite. And that's just me.
Do you know, Kyle, by any chance, why it's been called sphalerite? Do you think? Do you think it's just based on the appearance or a misnaming, or where did it come from? Do you think?
I actually really wanted to ask Nicholas this. In my research, I was not able to find anything distinctive. Like I know maybe it was because sphalerite has been found. Like it's not that it hasn't been found in the area, but it's not. I couldn't find anything definitive.
My only guess, I've encountered this material in the market like anyone else, is that it probably occurs in an environment not unlike places where we can find some sulfide deposits. And it's very heavy, which sphalerite also is. I mean, it's deceptively heavy considering what its list of ingredients might be. And I think those things together just led people to assume that it was sphalerite, despite it not bearing any like optical resemblance to it.
Mm. And you brought up a good point before, Kyle, about the jaspers. There's Bumblebee Jasper, which contains no jasper in it. I know Dragon Blood Jasper, which is just Piedmontite and Epido, I believe. And it's amazing how many people just go, let's just call it a jasper, isn't it? When it's not necessarily. So we should be careful whenever we see a new jasper to work out whether that's going to have that jasper type energy or something totally different. Yeah.
Absolutely. Does it have quartz in it? Like, is quartz its like main makeup? Does it have that base of it being cryptocrystalline quartz? Yes or no? Like, that's generally the answer behind it. Like, we found out as we spoke about with Bumblebee Stone all those weeks ago, it's calcite, aragonite. Like, it's a very different makeup that actually makes it what it is. And this is the thing, there are minerals that can optically resemble each other a little bit, right? Like, some are a little bit clear, some are a little bit shiny, some are a little bit purple, and they just go, oh yeah. And this is where I think a lot of people that maybe are a little bit colorblind or don't see color in the same way, and they're like, no judgment, Nicholas, but like when it's coming out, they're like, oh yeah, that looks like that, and that looks like that. And it's not until someone goes, actually, like, let's look at it properly, you actually get to understand it more.
Yeah, I guess that's one thing we should look at is why do crystals end up having misleading names? Sometimes, like I was talking about with Atlanticite, it's if we give it a fancier name, we'll be able to sell it more successfully and maybe at a higher price. And I know Nicholas has got one on his list that we're going to dive into in a minute. And sometimes it is that just failure to be able to recognize exactly what it is. I remember once when I was traveling around Australia, kind of doing lots of Australian teaching crystal classes, I normally came with a bit of a list of these are all the crystals I'm going to talk about, so you might want to pop them in your shop because you might be able to sell them. And Numite, which is one of my favorite crystals for protection and empowerment and many other things, is always on that list. And I remember one poor shop had spent a significant amount of money on Numite, but when I got there, it definitely was not Numite. Numite's really easy to recognize. It has these long strips of glitter in it, and it was probably, you know, granite or something like that, or north side or something else that it just doesn't have the power of Numite, unfortunately. Now, was it that shop's fault? Was that shop trying to mislead shoppers? No. We've got to remember that the journey from a crystal being mined to a crystal ending up in a retail shop goes through several sets of hands. And we don't know whether someone deliberately makes a mistake or accidentally makes a mistake somewhere along that line. And obviously, not everyone's going to know everything about every single crystal. And that Numite may have just been renamed or by the apprentice or the person helping out sorting the crystals before they went off to the wholesaler and that type of thing as well. So this is where don't always believe the label in the shop. It's not always the shop's problem or not problem, not them trying to mislead you. They may have thought, and this lady thought she'd never heard of Numite before. I had just raved about it, And so sometimes they buy it unknowingly, and so we kind of do have to be aware and get to know your crystals as best you can. And the best way to do that is just keep listening to our confabs every week. So, Nicholas, when we were kind of planning this episode, I wrote Atlantisite, Kyle wrote Salarite, and then you kind of wrote an essay on the ones you were going to talk about. So we're going to cozy on in. I've got my nana blanket with me to keep me warm today. Let's find out what gets your goat and what are some of the ones that you feel are misleading and not appropriate in the crystal world.
Well, I think it's helpful to like take a step back and really kind of circle back around to this question of why. Why do these names exist? How do they come into practice? And who do they really serve? And I think in most cases, when we have these deceptive names, they're going to fall into one of approximately three camps. We have genuine mistaken identity. A really good example of this, sometime in the middle of the 20th century, there are these tufts of kind of golden, metallic, fuzzy looking needles or threads found in mostly amethystine quartz. Now, if you're looking through a field guide of unusual rocks and minerals, you might put that up against an image of a mineral called cacoxenite and go, okay, this is cacoxenite in amethyst or cacoxenite in quartz varietal amethyst. And it wouldn't be until decades later that there's like a chemical analysis, destructive analysis performed on these that shows with absolute certainty there is no cacoxenite in this material whatsoever. And all of that is goethite, which is, when preserved in quartz, sometimes a beautiful golden metallic color, but most of the time when it's not, is anything but that. It is drab and dull and brown and sometimes kind of crumbly. So there are plenty of examples of things that kind of fall into this camp of mistaken identity. The goethite mislabeled as cacoxenite is a great example of that. We can think of a lot of things that are called jaspers that are kind of in a similar group. They're dark, they're hard stones. We're going to call them jasper. Another great example is the so-called lepidocrosite in quartz. Statistically speaking, you are extremely unlikely to ever encounter lepidocrosite in quartz, particularly not in the amethystine quartzes in which it is so popularly attested. And virtually every example of that you'll ever see is really hematite. And this is a case where someone made an educated guess, just not educated enough that was backed up by a chemical analysis. And now we know better, but it seems like some sectors of the market have done better about staying current with this than others. And that can kind of link it to other examples. We also have instances where it's just easier to give something a new name rather than listing a long string of adjectives or ingredients or any kinds of other things. So I think a pretty fine example of this is euperlite. So euperlite is fluorescent syenite. Syenite is an intrusive igneous rock that is felsic in composition but lower in its silica content than granite, and usually has a pretty high feldspathoid content. So if I qualify all of those things about what makes this one particular fluorescent syenite special, I've lost you like 2 words in. Even the word syenite, I'm probably going to lose you because it doesn't have any relevance. But if you happen to be from the Upper Peninsula, you are called a Yooper. And so that's the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, by the way, here in the States. You're called a Yooper. And therefore, if someone says Yooperlite, you understand this rock is found where you are from. And although that is a trademarked name, although it may contribute to the inflation of the price, it is still a pretty cool material and it designates it as useful. Another maybe good example of something that hasn't been trademarked but gives it just an easier name to use is something like the Kundalini quartz, the so-called Kundalini quartz, which is a particular formation of Congo citrine. I actually have plenty of citrine from the Congo that doesn't resemble this whatsoever. If it comes from different deposits, if it forms under slightly conditions, it's not going to look like the so-called Kundalini quartz. But instead of giving you all of the different names, well, it's quartz, variety citrine, sometimes variety smoky, that usually has multi-stage growth with a sprouting habit. Again, by the time I finish the discussion, we've kind of lost the thread. So having names that help disambiguate this citrine versus that citrine, not necessarily inherently bad, but it's the third category that is challenging, and it is deliberate misrepresentation or deliberate over romanticization. And sometimes these can be linked, right? We find something, we're not entirely sure what it is, we call it something, and then that kind of catches on, and then we realize, oh, once we get it analyzed, it's way more common. But if I keep calling it this other thing, people want it. So that so-called sphalerite, really good example of that. Um, but there are also some others. There's the so-called blue scheelite, which contains zero scheelite. Scheelite is an incredibly rare ore of tungsten. It is heavier than just about any other mineral you're ever going to pick up. When you hold a piece of this blue scheelite, it's comparatively light as a feather. Under certain wavelengths of light, it will fluoresce a similar color, but not all of the same wavelengths that do the same thing to scheelite. And then, there's the factor that it's really just calcite and aragonite intergrown, and small amounts of iron ions are what are giving it that brilliant blue color. Now, there's some unusual phenomena that are still present in this rock, but calling it blue scheelite makes it out to be something it isn't. And let's be honest, there's no really good name for this material. I've seen it called lapis lazuli onyx, which makes people think that maybe it's related to lapis lazuli. I mean, both of those rocks are blue and they're carbonate rich. It's better than scheelite, I guess. And those are just kind of the things we have to contend with. We also end up with examples of things like the so-called Chinese charoite, which was an intergrowth of fluorite and quartz. This was popular on the market probably around 20, 25 years ago. And thankfully, when you put that material beside actual charoite, they look so dissimilar that eventually people just stopped calling it this. But 5 years ago, it got a new name. And now it is called amaranthine, from the Greek, meaning anthos means flower. So it does have sometimes a kind of floral pattern to it. But now if instead of calling it low quality fluorite in low quality quartz, if we call it amaranthine, we slap a little registered or trademark symbol next to a name like that, we've hidden what it really is. We also have examples of stuff that if we take a look at it and we realize what it is, we can go buy it from another vendor for a fraction of the price. So, maybe the beautiful chevron amethysts that come from Madagascar are a good example of a material that's pretty plentiful on the market, not crazy expensive. But if you buy it as amazes or amethyst azeztulite, you're going to spend 20 times as much on the same material. Also, when you look at the source material that describes what this so-called amethyst azeztulite is in print, it's described as coming from it's one of two descriptions. It's either an island, a remote island off the coast of Africa, or a remote island in the Indian Ocean, both of which describe the island of Madagascar. So if you can parse that out and figure out that Amazes is just chevron amethyst from Madagascar, you can go, oh, I can go get that for way less. So it's this deliberate misrepresentation bit that makes it really difficult to navigate. So, all of our azeztulates are quartz. We're going to find, our quartzes that have fancy numbers attached to them. I don't even think I have to say them out loud. They might be super specimens to have in your collection, but also they don't have seven things. As we discussed, virtually all of the cacoxenite ever been labeled in quartz is actually not cacoxenite. Virtually every example of lepidocrosite in quartz isn't actually lepidocrosite. And so like the number associated with that gemstone shrinks under these instances. And so I think this is a topic that I get really passionate about. I don't have a problem with trade names. Look at angelite. You can buy blue anhydrite for the same price as angelite. And in fact, if it is euhedral crystals of blue anhydrite, it will be many times more expensive than angelite. It's not the name that inherently drives the cost, but it's when we use the name to create a little extra mystique, to misrepresent something as being rarer or more valuable than it truly is, that's when we end up with issues. And there are scores and scores of these kinds of things out there. So many that I put a list of, I don't know, maybe 100 or so in my little pocket encyclopedia. So at the back, there is this glossary of trade names, artificial gems, and mistaken identities. Some of these are totally honest mistakes, some of them not so much. But I have a tip for folks who are interested. You can, depending on the government agency you consult with. So here in the United States, that's going to be the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. You can go to their website, uspto.gov, and you can do a search of all of the patents, all of the trademarks, all of the other kinds of service marks, and look up some of these things. And if you find a rock that has TM or R next to its name, it's not a valid mineral species. Curiously, sometimes you find some of these things in print with those little designations beside them, but then you look them up in the Patent and Trademark Office and you go, oh, actually, that's not trademarked. The trademark was abandoned, or it was denied, or it's considered a dead application, or someone withdrew it. And yet you'll still find those gem materials with those trademark names, with those service marks next to them, which is actually against the law. So just be mindful that some of those things you might know and love under one name are really common rocks. And there are lots of lovely but common granite and marble and jasper and quartz especially that are being sold as things they are not. We also get examples of glass and other man-made materials being labeled rare and mystical things. And then, of course, we just get things for which there's no better term. So misleading names are something that can be really challenging to navigate. And I think one of the best things we can do is just always ask, but what is this material really? Like, what is it actually made out of? And that doesn't mean we have to memorize its chemical formula, but we should be able to go, oh, this is quartz. Instead of saying it's an unusual silicate mineral, which silicate mineral? Let's be specific here. We want to find out where it comes from. That's also super important for understanding provenance, locality, and for giving us a basis for comparison. Because, you know, if you're looking up this so-called blue scheelite and you look at where it comes from on the map, there's no scheelite anywhere in that region. That should raise some red flags. And we can double check this on a resource like mindat.org. That's short for mineral database. It's a wonderful, non-spiritual, totally geological and mineralogical resource, but a free one you can check out online. And then the other question I always ask is, if we don't know exactly where a name comes from, a more important question is, who does this name serve? If it serves me as the consumer and having something easier to say, me as the purchaser to go, hey, have you seen this stuff on the market? I don't think that's inherently a bad thing. But if it's serving the miner, the crystal seller, the third-party dealer who's driving up prices, if we're seeing things getting trademarked unnecessarily, if we're seeing something being masqueraded as a mineral it doesn't contain, that's when we have to wonder who it's really serving. And it's almost never the consumer, the collector, or the healer. It's almost invariably someone in the market who's leveraging that to make money.
You are very politically correct and restrained there, Nicholas. I love that. I must admit, azezulite, I'm going to put it out there. That's one that is low grade quartz. It comes with a very interesting story about how it was blessed by some beings and that type of thing as well. And it's really interesting watching people at just how much they lose their minds at this low grade quartz, which is similar to what I find in my driveway type of thing. So be mindful of, I think for the individual as well, we need to be mindful of what our experience is with the crystal. There are children that will find a rock on the road or a rock at the beach, and they don't know what it is, but it's their most magical, powerful, beautiful crystal or stone that they love, type of thing. If you have that relationship with an azeztulite or something like that, go with that. But we've got to be really careful of not being sheep, and just because there's a lot of hype written about it by an author or by a seller or something like that, that we don't start shelling out hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars for something that, hey, you're welcome to come up to my driveway and pick a couple of pieces off for $1 if you really want, in that way as well. I was thinking also, as we were talking, it's something I haven't thought about before, naming of crystals. There are new crystals being found from time to time, and traditionally they're normally named after the person who finds them, someone the person who finds them likes, or where they're actually found. Whereas there are a few, like, Angelite, I guess, is kind of a bit of that trade name, although it's anhydrite as well, where I guess there's no harm in really giving it a bit more of a mystical name. But I really like your point, Nicholas, of who is that name serving? Was it just a nice name for us to identify that crystal, or was it to hike up prices and make it sound more impressive than it actually is? So I think that's something to take into consideration as well. What about yourself, Kyle? Any thoughts?
I think it's one of those things that, as well, like the science that we understand and what we're able to see and understand about minerals is becoming clearer all the time, right? We have new technology, we're looking at things deeper, we're looking at things again and again, and we're learning more about them. And I think it's really important that we're just staying educated as much as you can. You're doing research. As my father taught me a billion years ago, question everything, right? Just always throw questions in. Like, one of my favorites of recent time was the like more sit as jade thing, right? It came onto the market, it was being sold as jade, and people realized it was its own thing. It was kind of not being sold inauthentically. It was just, it's green, it's coming from the same region, must be jade. They realized it's its own complex, unique thing, and now it's appreciated and wanted for its own unique thing. And now people want more sit because it's more sit. Do you know what I mean? Like, it has this own thing. When we learn, we discover more, we can work with them better. And I think that is the key. It's that education, it's that questioning, it's that doing research, it's looking into these things that are complex, right? Even within a single mineral, like when Nicholas was talking about the names, it took me right back to doing my degree. And it's like this variety, this species, this, like, and you have to put all of that in order. And that's getting that degree behind me was all about, was like understanding that that meant that, meant that, and that meant that. And I think the New Age community and the geological, mineralogical community, we need more crossover, right? Because there is so much science behind it. And when there's no science behind it, you can call it whatever you want, you can say whatever you want about it. And it's like, sure, but there is facts behind these things. There is research, there is makeup. Like, they are made up of like perfect order. That's the whole reason why we love minerals and crystals, is like that order that they have. And if we lose the order, we lose everything.
And I think that's where, and Nicholas displayed that perfectly when we talked about Violane a couple of episodes ago, in the way that if you understand the structure and what's actually in the crystal, it allows you to understand the crystal more, type of thing. So from a spiritual point of view, you can get some hints on what that's actually about without kind of looking to other authors and their interpretation, just by knowing what minerals make it up, what structure it is, and those types of things as well. And I will echo what Nicholas said, the mindat.org. I use it a lot. I can see Kyle nodding as well. I get the feeling, and this is only my personal impression, but someone is looking after this site and housing the site and that type of thing, and they're always asking for donations. So I think if you're on there occasionally, if you can spare a little bit of money to help support it, because it is. I know last week it was down, and I don't know, it must have just been a bad internet day, but I'm like, if we ever lose that, I've used that in my writings, with checking references. If you put in something like a zeztulite, it will then go, this is a trade name for a quartz that's found in the Carolinas. It will actually help you to really, it's kind of like the crystal Wikipedia. So it's a really great asset that I think we should all look out for as well. Lovely. Yes.
There is the gentleman behind Mindat, Jolian, I can't remember his surname. He has just appeared on Instagram. Like he's had an account for a while, but he's just appeared and he's making videos on Instagram. And they're what is a rare crystal? What is an expensive crystal? Like he's diving into these questions and coming from an amazing place. And then he put together the Lego crystal mineral set that he just received as well. So follow him on Instagram. I can't remember his name. I'll try and put it into the information afterwards. He is like, he's so authentic, he's adorable, and I'm loving like hearing him speak about things. I think it's been a really interesting, and it's only been the last month. Like it's been a really recent thing.
Amazing. We'll have to check that out. Yeah, we'll put the details in the link below for sure. Now, we've been a little bit inconsistent with our episodes over the last few weeks, but Nicholas has got an excuse. What's been happening, Nicholas?
Well, Nicholas always has a million excuses for stuff, but I have a very specific one this time, and that's because I left the state of Florida to go have a kind of early birthday party for my brand new book, The Witching Stones. It's not officially out yet, but I have my copy, and I was able to kind of bring it out into the world when I went up to Massachusetts recently and do my very first book signing and talk and lecture on it. And it's so exciting to see it begin to make its way out into the world.
Amazing. I'm also going to jump on the shameless promotion bandwagon as well. I've got a new book out. It's called Witchcraft or Wicca. This was written in collaboration with my high priestess, the Witch of Oz, Lady Tamara von Forslund. And basically, what we do is we can kind of counteract. She talks about something from a traditional witchcraft point of view, and I look at it, how can we put a modern twist on it? Because one of the great things about witchcraft and Wicca is that it's a religion that continues to evolve and to be relevant with the times. And so we've kind of played against each other on, well, this is how you used to do it, this is how we could do it now. Which one is better? Well, there's no better, and you're left to make up your own decision on that. But there is a bit of crystal work in there, as well as some essential oils and some other aspects as well, bringing some of these new tools that we have in the new age into our traditional work and evolving the religion to resonate with what resonates with us, because that's one of the beautiful things about witchcraft and Wicca as well. So that's available on my website. I think it is available on some of the Amazons and different things like that as well. But remember that when you grab our books, it allows us to keep doing what we do and doing confabs and that type of thing as well. So we'll be back next week when we're going to be back diving into another amazing gift of Mother Earth. And we promise you that it won't be a misleading name. We'll talk about what it actually is. Until then, take care and blessed be.